Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hey, welcome to another pandemic version of Cannabis Common Sense and our hemp news. We have a lot of interesting hemp news this week, including a synopsis of the latest reports about the two initiatives that have qualified here in Oregon. One, to decriminalize all drugs, and the other to allow psilocybin, or the active ingredient in mushrooms, to be used for therapeutic purposes in controlled settings. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. I just also want to say that we definitely support the movement to have police accountability and reorganization. You know, we shouldn't have police officers being mental health care workers, being family guidance people. We need to reorganize our resources. Of course, people here in Portland think that, but we're streaming around the world. It's very peaceful here in Portland. I live a block away from a police station. There have been several protests at that station. They have been mostly peaceful, and the only thing I hear are the police making announcements very loudly, but that's another story. Oregon officials finalized a series of analyses this week on separate ballot measures to legalize psilocybin mushrooms for therapeutic use and decriminalize drugs while investing in substance misuse treatment. The Oregon Criminal Justice Commission determined that the decriminalization initiative would reduce felony and misdemeanor convictions for drug possession by 91%, and that reduction would be, quote, substantial for all racial groups, ranging from 82.9% for Asian Oregonians to approximately 94% for Native Americans and Black Oregonians. Overall, the policy change would result in a 95% drop in racial disparities for possession arrests, the panel projects. The new report, published on Wednesday, cites research indicating that the resulting, quote, drop in convictions will result in fewer collateral consequences stemming from criminal justice system involvement, which include difficulties in finding employment, loss of access to student loans for education, difficulties in obtaining housing, restrictions on professional licensing, and other issues, end quote. The criminalization proposal was the first ballot initiative in Oregon's history to receive a report on the racial justice implications of its provisions under a little utilized procedure where lawmakers can request such analysis. The further information will be included in a voter pamphlet as a factual statement from the Secretary of State's office. Both the psilocybin therapy and drug decriminalization measures also received final explanatory statements and physical impact statements this week. For the therapeutic psilocybin legalization initiative, the Financial Estimate Committee said that it projects the measure will have an impact of $5.4 billion from the general fund during the 2-year development period. After that, the program is established. It will cost $3.1 million annually, which will be covered by the fees and tax funds for the administration and enforcement of the act, end quote. The explanatory statement says the measure, quote, directs the Oregon Health Authority to regulate the manufacture, delivery, purchase, and consumption of psilocybin, a psychoactive component found in certain mushrooms, at licensed psilocybin service centers, and allow that a person be allowed to purchase, possess, consume, and experience the effects of psilocybin only at a licensed psilocybin service center during a psilocybin administered session with a licensed psilocybin service facilitator, end quote. It also describes an initial 2-year development period during which officials will research and make recommendations on the safety and efficacy of using psilocybin to treat mental health conditions, after which time the new law will allow a client who is at least 21 years of age to purchase, possess, consume, and experience the effects of psilocybin at a licensed psilocybin service center during a psilocybin administered session with a licensed psilocybin service facilitator. The drug possession decriminalization measure is expected to cost $57 million annually, according to state officials, but it will be covered by marijuana tax revenue, which is estimated at $61.1 million in 2019 through 21 and $182.4 million for 2021 through 2023, or a biennium, and would therefore be sufficient to meet this requirement. Cannabis revenues to cities and counties would be reduced under the measure. The reform would also save money through reduced drug enforcement. Those savings are estimated to be $250,000 this year and $24.5 million in 2021 through 23, that biennium. The analysis says, quote, this will reduce revenue transferred from the Department of Corrections for local government community corrections by $250,000 in 2019 to 21 and $24.5 million in 21 to 23. These savings are expected to increase beyond the 21 to 23 biennium, end quote. The initiative mandates establishment of at least one addiction recovery center in each existing coordinated area in the state, end quote. The separate explanatory statement says and describes how they would be funded with marijuana tax revenue. The measure eliminates criminal penalties for possession of specified quantities of controlled substances by adults and juveniles. Instead, possession of these specified quantities of controlled substances becomes a non-criminal Class E violation for which the maximum punishment is a $100 fine or completion of a health assessment with an addiction treatment professional, end quote. So those are our two initiatives we'll be choosing here in Oregon. Here's a status update on other 2020 drug policy reform campaigns across the country. A measure to effectively decriminalize a wide range of psychedelics has officially qualified for the November ballot in the city of Washington, D.C. In Montana, activists say last month that county officials have already certified that they collected enough signatures to place 2 marijuana legalization measures on the Montana state ballot, though the Secretary of State's office has yet to make that official. In Arizona, the organizers of the legalization effort turned in 420,000 signatures to qualify for a ballot measure last month. That's more than twice the minimum required number of signatures, but it hasn't been certified yet. Organizers in Nebraska last month submitted 182,000 signatures in an attempt to put a medical marijuana measure on November's Nebraska ballot. Idaho activists behind a medical marijuana legalization initiative were hoping to get a second wind after a federal judge said recently that the state must make accommodations for a separate ballot campaign due to signature gathering complications caused by the coronavirus pandemic. But following a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling against the other groups, their hopes are dashed in Idaho. Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak and stay-at-home mandate, separate measures to legalize marijuana for medical and recreational purposes qualified in South Dakota's November ballot. The New Jersey legislature approved putting a cannabis legalization referendum before voters as well this November. And in Mississippi, activists gathered enough signatures to qualify a medical cannabis legalization initiative for the ballot, though lawmakers also approved a competing and, from advocates' standpoint, less desirable medical marijuana proposal that will appear alongside the campaign-backed initiative. So in Mississippi, they'll have a activist-based medical marijuana initiative and a legislature, which probably means law enforcement-based medical marijuana measure. In Missouri, a campaign to legalize cannabis in Missouri officially gave up its efforts for 2020 due to signature collection being virtually impossible in the face of social distancing measures. North Dakota marijuana legalization activists are shifting focus and will seek qualification for the 2022 ballot. Washington State activists had planned to pursue a drug decriminalization and treatment measure through the ballot, but citing concerns about the COVID-19 outbreak, they announced last month that they will be targeting the legislature instead. Back in Washington, D.C., Vice President Mike Pence's top staffer on Thursday joined the chorus of Republicans criticizing House Democrats for including marijuana banking provision in the House of Representatives' latest coronavirus relief bill. Mark Short, who is Vice President Pence's chief of staff and previously served as the Director of Legislative Affairs for the White House, discussed the COVID-19 legislation during an interview with Fox Business and described the Democrats' proposal as a liberal wish list with all sorts of things totally unrelated to coronavirus. In one instance, they provided guarantees for banking access for marijuana growers. That has absolutely nothing to do with the coronavirus, end quote, Short said. Vice President Mike Pence's top staffer on Thursday joined the chorus of Republicans criticizing House Democrats for including marijuana banking provisions in the coronavirus bill. But Short said, Vice President staffer Short's referring to language that was inserted from the Secure and Fair Enforcement, or SAFE, Banking Act to protect financial institutions that service state legal cannabis businesses from being penalized by federal regulators. Numerous Republicans, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who's running for re-election, have been critical of the provision, arguing that it is not germane to the issue at hand. The Majority Leader took a shot at House Speaker Nancy Pelosi this week after she defended the inclusion of the banking language and called marijuana a proven therapy. Democrats, for their part, have made the case that granting cannabis businesses with access to central banking system would mitigate the spread of the virus by allowing customers to use electronic payments rather than exchange cash. They also say it could provide an infusion of dollars into the financial system that's especially needed amid the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. Hawaii's Representative Tulsi Gabbard said in an interview this week that she agrees with her colleagues that marijuana banking provisions relevant to COVID-19. Gabbard said, quote, by continuing to disallow anyone associated with these industries that states have deemed legal is further perpetuating serious problems and uncertainty during a time when, frankly, we need as much certainty as we can get, end quote. While the Senate did not include the banking language as part of their COVID-19 bill, there's still House-passed standalone legislation that could be acted upon. The SAFE Banking Act has been sitting in the Senate Banking Committee for months as lawmakers negotiate over the finer points of the proposal. Last month, a bipartisan coalition of state treasurers sent a letter to congressional leaders asking that they include marijuana banking protections in the next piece of coronavirus relief legislation. In May, a bipartisan coalition of 34 state attorneys general similarly wrote to Congress to urge the passage of COVID-19 legislation containing cannabis banking provisions. From down south in my old home of Texas, where I lived till I was 15, 4 Texas companies are suing to overturn the state's new ban on the manufacture and sale of smokable hemp products, which they warn will shut Texas companies out of a multi-billion-dollar industry and lead to inaccurately labeled products on store shelves. I was also the keynote speaker at the Texas Hemp Convention back in January, the end of January. But in the lawsuit, which was filed in Texas's Travis County District Court on Wednesday, the companies are asking a judge to declare the ban unconstitutional and allow hemp production intended for smoking or vaping to be produced and sold legally across the state, as it had been until just this week. Chelsea Spencer, who's counsel for the lead plaintiff, Crown Distributing, said, quote, at a time when the Texas economy is reeling from the fiscal impact of COVID-19, it's unfortunate that the state chose to foreclose such a large economic opportunity for Texas and instead chose to force long-standing Texas businesses and jobs across the border to neighboring states such as Oklahoma. Crown Distributing, which manufactures the popular Wild Hemp brand of smokable products, stands to lose almost $60 million in revenue over the next 5 years if the bans are upheld, Spencer told us in an email. She said, quote, the state of Texas stands to lose $2.9 million in sales tax revenue alone, end quote. Texas legalized hemp in 2019 in large part to capture a piece of an industry that's booming following the federal legalization of the crop through the 2018 Farm Bill. Hemp, a category of cannabis that contains less than 1/3 of 1% THC, has a variety of uses. Its seeds are a nutritious food source, its fibrous stalks can be made into textiles, building material, or paper, and its flowers can produce a variety of cannabinoids, most notably cannabidiol or CBD, and THC or tetrahydrocannabinol. Texas's hemp laws passed the legislature specifically prohibited the manufacture of hemp products intended for smoking or vaping, though it left open the door for selling products made out of state. But a year later, regulators at the Texas Department of State Health Services issued rules extending that ban to forbid the retail sale of any smokable hemp products. That restriction took effect just last week. While Texas's legalization of hemp last year was met with considerable fanfare, its rollout has been bumpy. In addition to industry frustration over bans of smokable, legalization has also sparked unintentional disruptions in marijuana enforcement across the state. Because hemp, whether it's flower or vape liquid, is virtually indistinguishable from marijuana without testing, law enforcement agencies across the state of Texas say they're now unable to bring sound criminal cases without analyzing seized cannabis for THC. Facing backlogs and high costs of private labs, prosecutors across Texas dropped hundreds of low-level cases. The situation's led to a patchwork of marijuana enforcement policies across the state, and uncertainty for consumers who still risk arrest for hemp products that are perfectly legal under Texas law. Next story in Louisiana, a military veteran who was sentenced to life in prison for selling $30 worth of cannabis to an undercover Louisiana police officer was recently re-sentenced to time served and will be released from prison after almost 15 years. Derek Harris, a military veteran who was arrested in Louisiana in 2007 for selling an undercover officer less than 1 gram of cannabis worth $30, they said, was recently re-sentenced to time served and will be released from prison. He was originally sentenced to life and has already served 13 years. Harris was initially sentenced to 15 years, but was re-sentenced in 2012 to life under the state's habitual offender law. The state Supreme Court had agreed to hear his case, agreeing that he had, quote, ineffective assistance of counsel at sentencing on post-conviction review, end quote. In the opinion, Louisiana Supreme Court Justice John Weimer described Harris's previous offenses as nonviolent marijuana crimes. Weimer added that Harris was, quote, not a drug kingpin, end quote, and didn't appear to be a full-time drug dealer. During the 2012 resentencing, 15th Judicial District Judge Durwood Conk said his hands were tied by the habitual offender law when he imposed the life prison sentence. The Louisiana Supreme Court had found that judges can and must deviate from a mandatory minimum sentence in a case if they determine it, quote, shocks the conscience, end quote. Harris's release date has not been confirmed, but he's expected to move closer to his family in Kentucky. His brother Antoine said his brother is still having a bit shocked by the ruling. The brothers lost their mother while Derek has been incarcerated. As we mentioned briefly earlier, the United States Senate leader and others are creating a false feud with Speaker Pelosi on cannabis banking. In a July 31st press conference, Speaker Pelosi was asked whether House-backed cannabis-specific provisions in the latest COVID-19 economic relief bill were directly related to the stimulus package. To be clear, the cannabis provisions in question are explicit to amending federal law so that cannabis-licensed marijuana businesses that are legal under state law can freely engage in relationships with banks and other financial institutions. Personally, I have had my bank accounts closed literally 20 different times. Up until about 6 months ago, I said it was 19 times and drew a parallel with the Rolling Stones song 19th Nervous Breakdown. But since then, I've had another bank account closed. So now I'm up to 20 bank accounts since 2007. 18 times they would not tell me why my account was being closed. Twice they said it was because I helped medical marijuana patients. Now you know. But these federal provisions are far from controversial and possess bipartisan support. In fact, members of the House voted 321 to 103 this past fall in favor of similar standalone legislation, the Safe Banking Act, with 229 Democrats and 91 Republicans casting yes votes. A previous House-backed COVID relief package, the HEROES Act, had also included similar cannabis-specific banking language. Currently, such relationships between state licensed marijuana businesses and banks are discouraged under federal law. According to the latest data available from the United States Department of Treasury, only a few hundred banks and credit unions nationwide provide services to the thousands of cannabis-related businesses operating in over 30 states. Speaker Pelosi responded to a question by stating, "I don't agree with you that cannabis is not related to this," alluding to the fact that the state legal cannabis industry, which now employs an estimated 250,000 Americans, has been impacted by the pandemic and ensuing economic recession. She then acknowledged, quote, "This is a therapy that has proven successful," end quote. A statement that appears to allude to the reality that 33 states now recognize the therapeutic utility of cannabis and cannabis products by statute. She then moved on to address other issues. In the following days, however, some opponents of marijuana policy reform have manipulated Speaker Pelosi's comments to imply that she was opining that cannabis therapy has been proven specifically to be successful for the treatment of COVID-19. Well, that's just false. She did not. Most recently, United States Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell tweeted, quote, "I hope she shared this breakthrough with Dr. Fauci," end quote. The speaker is correct to say that marijuana is accepted as a legitimate therapeutic option for certain patients. The majority of the United States, as well as the District of Columbia, recognize the therapeutic utility of cannabis and regulate its production and distribution to authorized patients. Furthermore, during the COVID-19 pandemic, dozens of states have designated marijuana producers and retailers as essential businesses, allowing them to provide uninterrupted and in some cases expanded services during the COVID-19 outbreak. From Illinois, sales of adult-use cannabis products in Illinois rose over 20% in July to reach a record high, according to data provided by the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation in Illinois. The agency reported just under $61 million in retail adult-use cannabis sales for the month of July, up 22% from June and an increase of 36% since January, when legal sales began in the state. Sales of medical cannabis products were not calculated in these tallies. The state's rising sales totals are consistent with data from other states like Oregon and Colorado, which has similarly reported record high revenue from the sale of marijuana products in recent months. According to recent economic analysis by New Frontier Data, quote, "One unanticipated effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has been the growth, acceleration of legal cannabis markets and erosion of the illicit market in those states which have activated both medical and adult use sales," end quote. Illinois is among dozens of states that designated marijuana retailers as essential businesses during the pandemic. Our next story is from Baltimore, Maryland. Police may not rely on the odor of marijuana as a justification to perform a warrantless search of persons or to make an arrest, according to a unanimous decision issued last week by Maryland's highest court. Maryland's Supreme Court opined, quote, "The Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures prohibits law enforcement officers from arresting and searching a person without a warrant based solely upon the odor of marijuana on or about that person. Probable cause to conduct a lawful arrest requires that the arrestee committed a felony or was committing a felony or misdemeanor in a law enforcement officer's presence. Possession of less than 10 grams of marijuana is a civil offense, not a felony or a misdemeanor in the state of Maryland. Therefore, law enforcement officers need probable cause to believe the arrestee is in possession of a criminal amount of marijuana, more than 10 grams, to conduct a lawful arrest. The odor of marijuana alone does not indicate the quantity, if any, of marijuana in someone's possession," end quote, Maryland Supreme Court wrote. The ruling reverses a lower court ruling that had held the search to be lawful. The ruling does not overturn prior case law in the state upholding some searches of a person's vehicle based on the smell of cannabis. Courts in various other states, including Colorado, Massachusetts, and Vermont, have also issued opinions limiting the ability of an officer to conduct a warrantless search following statewide changes in the legal status of cannabis possession. Our next story tonight is out of Tucson, Arizona. The adjunctive use of cannabis is associated with a reduction in opioid use and emergency room visits among patients with non-cancer pain, according to findings of literature review published in the journal Systemic Reviews. A team of investigators affiliated with the University of Arizona, Mel and Enid Zuckerman School of Public Health, analyzed data from 9 studies involving 7,222 participants with non-cancer chronic pain. The authors identified, quote, a much higher reduction in opioid dosage, reduced emergency room visits, and hospital admissions from chronic non-cancer pain by medical cannabis users compared to people with no additional use of medical cannabis. There was 64 to 75% reduction in opioid use by medical cannabis users and complete stoppage of opioid use for chronic non-cancer pain by 32 to 59% of medical cannabis users when compared to patients without additional use of medical cannabis, end quote. The findings are consistent with several prior studies that conclude that pain patients enrolled in state-sponsored medical cannabis access programs typically reduce or eliminate their opioid use over time. The authors of this study concluded, quote, given the current opioid epidemic in the USA and medical cannabis's recognized analgesic properties, medical cannabis could serve as a viable option to achieve opioid dosage reduction in managing non-cancer chronic pain, end quote. The full text of this study, Medical Cannabis for the Reduction of Opioid Dosage in the Treatment of Non-Cancer Chronic Pain, a Systemic Review, appears in Systemic Reviews. Our last story tonight is out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nearly 1 in 4 U.S. adults say in a poll that they have consumed cannabis within the past year, according to data published in the British Medical Journal Open. The researchers affiliated with Harvard Medical School and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Centers in Boston assessed marijuana use data from a nationally representative sample of over 35,000 United States adults. They reported, quote, overall, 53.5% of the U.S. adult population reported ever using marijuana between 2005 and 2018. The prevalence of lifetime marijuana use and first use before the age of 18 remained stable between 2005 to 2018. Overall, 22.6% of U.S. adults reported using marijuana within the last year, end quote. This is also consistent with prior studies that found evidence that those young adults who consume cannabis are doing so more frequently, but they did not report that a greater overall percentage of young adults were now using it. The full text of this study, retrospective cross-sectional analysis of the changes in marijuana use in the United States from 2005 to 2018, appears in this month's edition of the British Medical Journal Open. Well, that's the end of our hemp news segment for this week. We'll be back with another issue next week, and we hope you keep watching. If you have any questions, give us a call. You can call us at our office. It's 503-235-4606. It's 503-235-4606. Also, we have a physician referral service. If you need help anywhere in the USA, finding a doctor who can help you with medical marijuana, call us at 503-235-4606. Tune in again and help restore hemp. Good night.
From the heart.
There are times I turned out crooked, and times I turned on doubt. There are times I just kept trying, and times I just went without.
from the heart.
There are times I felt like screaming, and times I probably did. There are times I can't quite remember, and times I can never forget. There are times love is a shadow, and times love is a chain. There are times love is the light, and times love is to blame.
From the heart.
There are times when a smile is a smile, and times when it is not. There are times time buys, and times time bought. There are times I went way out there, and times I never came back. There are times of great feeling, and times I don't feel a thing. There are times love is a shadow, and times love is a chain. There are times love is the light, and times love is to blame.
From the heart.
There are times I keep waiting for, and times that are never going to come. There are times I could have done different, and times different isn't there.
From the heart.
There are times the balance is balance, and times the rush is too extreme. There are times it's all I can do to live, and times I'm glad that I do. Feeling crazier than hell. Got this time on my hands, and got you on my mind, and got nowhere else to go. The fires burn hot and cold. That's someplace in between the melt and the freeze. This need for reaching for you. You were all I could be. Now I'm here wearing alone. We were one, now I'm a ghost, falling from my place in the sun. This dizzy is out of control. The world keeps spinning. I heard a vibrating echoing. Sounded a lot like you. Amongst the truths I sought, you were the one I found. Now I'm needing the remembering close of memories of you holding my hand. Remembrances of laughter singing, songing the nights with belonging, sweetnessing the shelter of each other, reality, the reality of safe feeling.
Crazier than hell. This time on my hand. Got you on my mind. And I got nowhere else to go.
With these times of missing you, I'm never not going to love you. These days, without you to hold my hand, feeling crazier than hell. This crazy just goes on and on and on. In this confusion of me's, crazy together or crazy apart. When crazy is crazy, it's not always in our heads. Sometimes it's in our hearts. Feeling crazier than hell. Got this time on my hands and got you in my mind and got nowhere else to go. There's me, there's the other me, there's another me, and then there are the more me's. We all got a domino to play, so we've been trying to work it out. We don't know how your life turned or what all that means, but me and the me's, we're not going back. We already seen what we couldn't do. Any skeletons in our closets, our own private stash of bones that scream with no choice. There's no scream like the next scream, reducing the present into nothing, while eternity is now, not then. Who's divided into what? And how many does that make? There's love that loves, love that fears, love that possesses, love that needs proof. Where's the love that accepts, love that likes, love that cares? There's no forgetting some realities destiny threw at us, and fate wasn't much help with this way of loading the load when we didn't have any say. And it was up to us to carry it. In the land where the lie is king, using fear like glue, pretending isn't pretending. At least one of the me's have seen it all. Each and every one of us want the glory, but not a one of us likes the way we fall. And straying is a way of walking, when staying isn't an option, because we've been accused of some things we did and some things we didn't do, and we heard "I forgive yous" that lied. So me and the me's are looking for a me that will answer to me. So far, there's no one who will. In the rhyme of match, these embers of torch, sweeting the light, what you do to me, this temptation of heat, craving your liquid, that deep fire, then sweet rushing flame, an embracing of stirring. Your name is the spark, fire starting this roar, blazing through my heart.
Much is
said about love, but love seems too tame, with no way to explain our wilding of gentle. The reality of dream, the closing of close, melting destiny and fate, what is meant to be, this unraveling of need, this drenching of desire, and it all started with your smile, an embracing of stirring. Your name is the spark, fire starting this roar, blazing through my heart.
Much is said about love, but love seems to tame,
with no way to explain our wilding of gentle. In the rhyme of match, these embers of torch, sweeting the light, what you do to me, this temptation of heat, craving your liquid, that deep fire, then sweet rushing flame. There's a shadow over Sisterland with a Smith and Thomas pointed at her head. Pointed at her head. Money and authority have their own way of talking. Their own way of talking when it comes to the man versus what the woman said. Versus what the woman said. There's a shadow. There's a shadow. There's a shadow over Sisterland. Somewhere, sometimes, a woman lives the memory of the little girl's pain, dragging through the mind, dragging through the mind. Every day a compromise, just to do the time, just to do the time. Silence is a mask, silence is a mask, when nothing can be said, nothing can be said. There's a shadow, there's a shadow, there's a shadow over Sisterland. Goddess brought the chalice, Dominator made the blade, God slew the serpent, and the woman's bed was made. Tethers of chains, tethers of jewels, economic bondage runs by those rules. The laws of justice are business decisions. Gender and class cut with surgical precision. Religious definition in the politics of man. Church and state together, hand in hand. There's a shadow. There's a shadow. There's a shadow over Sisterland. Mother Earth as goddess is woman meets the God of men. Violent prayers, rationalizing madness, partnership comes to an end. Landlords, 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 ownership prevails, ownership prevails, ruling class industrial male, ruling class industrial male, ruling class industrial male. There's a shadow, there's a shadow, there's a shadow over Sisterland, over Sisterland. Goddess brought the chalice, Dominator made the blade, God slew the serpent, and the woman's bed was made, and the woman's bed was made, and the woman's bed was made. Hemp is about earth medicine. We got our medical marijuana issues. That serves us as people. But we really need to think about hemp because hemp is earth medicine, and hemp will benefit all of the human beings, not just the ones that are dependent on medical marijuana. So we need to start thinking in terms of the energy of hemp. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about it. give us this day our daily yeses. Yes to life. Yes to living. Yes to caring. Yes to giving. Yes to creating. Yes to thinking. Yes to clarity. Yes to balance. Yes to being. Yes to seeing. Yes to yeses. Give us this day our daily yeses. Confusion's chaos. Chaos is confusion. Desperation's despairs. Despairs, desperations. Programmed belief. Belief programmed. Manipulated minds. Minds manipulated. Behaviors, reactions. Reactions, behaviors. Fearful thinking. Thinking fearful. Inside. Outside. Outside. Inside. Thought altering. Altering thought. Perceptions diseasing. Diseasing perceptions. Forgetting medicine. Medicine forgetting. Coherent. Coherence. Coherency. Coherent. Clear thinking. Thinking clear. Prayers given. Given prayers. Peace and love. Love and peace. Realities created. Created realities. See whatever sees. Doing. Give us this day our daily yeses. Yes to yeses. Yes to seeing. Yes to being. Yes to balance. Yes to creating. Yes to thinking. Yes to clarity. Yes to caring. Yes to giving. Yes to living. Yes to life. Yes to yeses. Give us this day our daily yeses.
Elections turn out as well, and we'll build off what happens here on Tuesday no matter what. But I just wanted to be here today to again express my strong support for legalization, my strong support for industrial hemp as well, my strong support for ending prohibition, having rational drug policies in the state of Oregon and the United States of America to move in a totally different direction. And the last issue I'll touch on is the one that Lori, I think, called the press conference here today to emphasize as well, is expansion of the medical marijuana program to include post-traumatic stress. And that to me is a reasonable and again totally vital step for the state to take. We have people in the state right now. Oregon can and should be a leader in the research of how marijuana impacts ailments across the board. We have the growers here. We have the medical community here, and we obviously have the people in need here. We should put that together. Put the people who are suffering ailments together, the people doing research on marijuana, and the growers, and come up with the data so we can say with great confidence that someone who is suffering from PTSD with this strain of marijuana or that strain of marijuana can expect certain results. Someone with chronic pain with this strain of marijuana or that strain of marijuana used in this way can expect this results. The medical marijuana program, in my view, needs to be professionalized, and we need to make sure that it's having the best possible outcomes for the patients who are on it. And with that, I will just turn it over to you.
My other organization is VOTE, Victory Over the Enemy.
Hey, I like that.
Which is the unregistered voter in the state of California.
Oh, okay.
What we have to do is upgrade our standard of voting. We can send people to the moon, and we're sending satellites into outer space. I believe that our system of voting in this country is very antiquated, very old. It needs to be renewed and revised and updated. I think that the voting should be more important than Christmas.
Okay.
I think that we should spend a lot of money on educating the people. Look at it this way. The government is in favor of the United States public to vote. I feel that it's our duty to show them or to find a way to help the government find ways to help people vote. And I think with television, the telephone, computer optics, and satellite dishes and all this technology that we've got, we should be able to sit home and vote on all these important issues. And I'm sure the government wants everybody to vote. It's our constitutional right, and they stand behind it. I think that they should get behind us and help us to get out there and make voting a very important issue. It is important, even if you're not in favor of, say, the California Marijuana Initiative or the Hemp Initiative, that's fine. We would love for you to come out and speak your opinion. We want you out there voting. We want you to take an active part in this country. If you do, then I think this will solve the problem.
I want to thank you guys for watching. We're going to go out on another great song by Mr. John Coronet. We'll be back next week and help us restore hemp.
Yeah, restore hemp.
Another chapter as we turn the page. We exist within a Ukraine. I know that freedom's heard around the globe. Just where our future lies will nobody know. Oh, let's make the best of it now. 'Cause you never know when the sky will fall. Maybe the moon will reach the earth one day. We're not the same race that we used to be. Can't you see? Now the next time that